You are going to die. Not metaphorically, not someday in the distant future. Physically, your heart will stop, your lungs will cease. And for centuries, we assumed that was the end of the line for the brain. But in the last decade, neuroscience has peered into the final moments of human consciousness, and what they've found is nothing like the peaceful fade to black we were taught. The brain doesn't just turn off. It fights. It floods. And in the very last seconds, it may do something so strange that it changes the definition of death itself. Let's start with the moment it begins. The trigger is usually cardiac arrest. Your heart stops pumping oxygenated blood to your head. Within 10 seconds, you lose consciousness. This is not a slow drift. It is a sudden, brutal drop. Your brain's primary fuel is glucose and oxygen, and it stores almost none of it. It relies entirely on a continuous delivery. When the delivery stops, the power cuts. But the brain is built for survival. In the seconds following the cut, your neural tissue begins a desperate scramble. It switches to anaerobic metabolism. It tries to break down whatever glucose is left in the cells without oxygen. This produces lactic acid, and the pH inside your neurons drops. This acidification is toxic. The cells begin to swell. The membranes that hold your thoughts, your memories, your entire sense of self begin to leak. This is the phase of biological chaos. Doctors call it the Ischemic Cascade, and for decades, they assumed that once this cascade started, the brain was essentially dead, that consciousness was simply the flickering of a candle, snuffed out by the lack of oxygen. But they were wrong. In 2013, a neuroscientist named Jimo Borjigin at the University of Michigan published a study that shattered the medical textbook. She was observing the brains of rats as they underwent cardiac arrest. Her team had attached electrodes to their brains to monitor electrical activity. What they expected was a gradual flatline, the slow decay of brain waves into silence. Instead, they recorded a massive, synchronized surge of electrical activity in the moments immediately after the heart stopped. Gamma waves, the highest frequency brain waves known to science. The same waves associated with conscious perception, attention, and memory retrieval in healthy, awake humans. In those final seconds, as the rats were dying, their brains were firing harder than they had all day. It was a spike of hyperconsciousness. Borjigin's team measured this surge for a full 30 seconds after the heart stopped. 30 seconds of activity that looked indistinguishable from a highly alert, awake state. But this wasn't just happening in rats. In 2018, a team of neurologists at the University of Calgary were monitoring a human patient with an EEG when the patient went into cardiac arrest. The doctors had already been preparing for the worst. But the EEG unexpectedly caught the event, and it showed the exact same thing. A sudden, explosive burst of gamma and beta activity, high-frequency oscillations, lasting roughly 30 to 90 seconds after the heart ceased pumping. The patient's brain was still firing in a way that was neurologically incompatible with unconsciousness. So what is actually happening? The current leading theory is something called the wave of spreading depolarization. When oxygen runs out, your neurons cannot maintain their electrical gradients. The ion pumps fail. The positive and negative charges on either side of the cell membrane collapse. When that happens, a massive wave of electrical discharge ripples across the surface of the cortex, starting from the back of the brain and rolling toward the front. This wave is not a quiet shutdown. It's a final, violent, synchronized firing of every neuron in its path. It's as if the entire network of your consciousness, comprising 86 billion neurons, receives a single, final command to fire all at once. A collective scream of electricity. The brain does not fade to black. It blazes with light. But what about the actual feeling of dying? The subjective experience? This is where the science gets stranger. Because the surge of electricity doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It releases a cocktail of chemicals. In the minutes leading up to death, your brain's neurochemistry changes drastically. Endorphins flood the system. This is the body's natural morphine, and it is released to numb the pain of hypoxia. You don't feel the suffocation of your cells. You feel a profound, almost euphoric peace. But some researchers, particularly those studying near-death experiences, have proposed something even more controversial. The endorphin rush is real, but it may not be the whole story. There is a theory that the pineal gland, a tiny structure deep in the center of your brain, releases a massive dose of dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, at the moment of death. DMT is a powerful psychedelic compound. It is naturally produced in trace amounts in the human body, and it is known to induce intense, vivid hallucinations, feelings of unity, and encounters with otherworldly entities. The theory, popularized by Dr. Rick Strassman in the 1990s, is that the brain builds up a reservoir of DMT in its synapses. When the heartbeat stops, the neural membranes dissolve, and this DMT is released all at once, flooding the dying brain with an altered state of consciousness. If this is true, death is not just a surge of electrical fire, it is a trip. However, this is where we have to be careful. The DMT at death hypothesis has never been proven in a human. We do not yet have the technology to measure a transient spike of DMT in a dying human brain. It remains a beautiful, albeit scientifically unconfirmed, speculation. What we can say with confidence is that near-death experiences, the tunnels, the life reviews, the floating above your own body, have a genuine neural basis. The surge of gamma waves, combined with the loss of oxygen, produces a state called disinhibition. Here's how it works. In your healthy brain, your prefrontal cortex acts as a filter. It suppresses irrelevant neural noise. It keeps your attention focused on the physical, linear reality in front of you. But when oxygen drops, the prefrontal cortex, which requires the most energy, shuts down first. The filter is removed. Without that filter, the entire rest of the brain begins firing out of sync. You start to see visual phenomena that aren't there. You feel a sense of disembodiment because your parietal lobe, which maintains your spatial sense of self, is failing. The tunnel of light is actually your brain's last attempt to process the collapse of the visual cortex under a severe lack of energy. It's like a projector that's losing power. The image shrinks to a single point of light in the center, pulling you into it. And the life review? That is your temporal lobe and hippocampus frantically replaying stored memories in a rapid, unorganized cascade, triggered by the electrical surge. The brain, in its final moments, isn't showing you heaven. It is showing you the entire map of your biological existence, scrolling through your hard drive one last time. But eventually, the surge subsides. The spreading depolarization wave has reached the front of the brain. The neurons have exhausted their last molecules of ATP. The electrical gradient is gone. The membranes have ruptured, and the gamma waves fall into a flat line. Silence. At this point, medical professionals declare brain death. No electrical activity, no reflexes, no consciousness. In the clinical definition, you are gone. But here is the terrifying twist. We still don't know exactly when consciousness ends. The EEG is a measure of aggregate electrical activity. It measures the firing of large networks of neurons. But your brain operates on quantum-level ion channels and microscopic synaptic clefts. Electrical silence on the scalp does not guarantee that every single neuron has stopped processing information. There could be lingering microcircuits firing for minutes or even hours after the heart stops. In 2021, a team at the University of Kentucky discovered that gene expression in the brain continues to ramp up for hours after death. Certain genes associated with neuronal repair and immune response actually become more active in the post-mortem brain. The brain is trying to heal itself. It is trying to clean up the cellular debris. It is biologically, chemically, relentlessly fighting to survive, even when the machinery has clearly failed. So what does this mean for what you feel at the end? It means you don't just fade, you experience a paradox. In the first 30 seconds, you are hyper-aware. Your brain is firing with incredible intensity. You are flooded with euphoric neurochemicals. You may witness a journey through a tunnel, see past memories, and feel a profound sense of detachment from your body. It is terrifying, but it is also seductive. Then the wave passes. The lights go out. The narrative of yourself breaks apart into disconnected fragments, and those fragments dissolve into the noise of a system that is no longer integrated. The brain does not simply blink out. It burns out. The same organ that built your entire identity, that processed every moment of your life, spends its final seconds roaring at full capacity. And in that roar, we don't see the end of consciousness. We see a desperate, beautiful attempt to hold on to the light. You will die, but your brain, until the very last electron, will never stop trying to be alive.